Hello and welcome into Sermon on Mount Nittany podcast episode 12. Zach Seiko and Tommy Butler bringing the action with you again. And it's the final home game for Penn State, the 7th of the season. And right now, Penn State's looking to go 10-2. They have postseason aspirations. They're definitely looking for a bowl game here. Tommy, but after what you told me before we started recording this, what exactly can Penn State do, or what needs to happen for Penn State to actually get back in the top four? College football playoffs, baby.
Well, I need to pull it up right now, but we talked last week about how Penn State had a chance to make it to the Big Ten championship, but it was basically over for the college football playoff. Apparently that's not true, and I overlooked a couple things, especially with a couple of the surprising losses last week. It turns out that Penn State can make it. Obviously, this is all depending on how voting goes in the polls. But if Penn State wins out, Bama and Miami win out. Bama's number one. Miami is likely to be in there as well. They're undefeated. TCU loses to, I think, Texas Tech, OK State, and OK State goes to the Big 12 conference and beats Oklahoma. Those teams would be below Penn State at that point. Michigan wins out, which we already need for the Big Ten championship, and OSU beats Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship. Therefore, Penn State won't make it to the Big Ten championship, obviously, in this thought process. Wazoo loses to Washington, and USC loses again, probably to Stanford in the Pac-12 conference championship. If all of that stuff happens, Penn State is likely to be one of those top four teams, depending on voting. Wisconsin was one of the ones that I was kind of frustrated with earlier about how they're ranked so highly even though they've played nobody. Do you think that, in your opinion, are any of these things likely to happen?
It's very difficult because when we were discussing this, I said that the committee doesn't look at this objectively. There is some subjectivity to it. It's why Clemson's number 2 right now. And they, that's a bad loss against Syracuse. And even though, I know Penn State has 2 losses, but it's a combined total of 4 points. And both games came on the road against ranked teams. So moving forward as Penn State, they can climb up in the rankings, but it's going to be very tough. Top 4, you would need a lot of teams to go down. You would need somehow Alabama to lose twice. You would have to expect them to lose to Auburn and Georgia. You would have to hope that Ohio State might lose out. So because Penn State needs that Big Ten championship game, and that's what it seems like at this point. Because a signature win over Wisconsin, it's going to be Wisconsin. We don't have to.
Yeah,
we don't have to explain
that's not
why.
A question.
But another signature win over Wisconsin might give them some extra brownie points. But it's just tough when you lose to Ohio State, when you lose to Michigan State. Okay, that's fine. But the rest of their schedule is just not, just hasn't been anything, crazy. They beat Rutgers like they should. They're going to beat Nebraska like they should. And then they go on the road to Maryland. And I'm not afraid of the Maryland game, but obviously I'm concerned. Maryland, one of those teams, you can never overlook some of these opponents, especially in the Big Ten. We've seen Iowa put up 55 points on Ohio State. But to keep from rambling, no, I don't think they make the playoffs, and I'm sorry to say that, but being realistic and just how Penn State doesn't control any of their fate. Yeah, they can win, and that's the most important thing. That's how they control their destiny, control the controllables. Franklin says it all the time, and he's right. He's very right. So, and since they can't control those uncontrollables, it's going to be very tough to even crack the top 6. I can see them making the 8 again, but just the amount of team, it's Penn State doesn't have any signature wins outside of Michigan, and that's what's holding them back from, they're like, well, Oklahoma's good because they've beaten TCU and they've beaten Ohio State on the road. Well, Penn State doesn't have anything like that, not even nearly. And unless Michigan can, pick up some of those signature wins over Wisconsin, who played a legitimate opponent for the first time all season and performed exceptionally well, which was expected. It would help in their favor if Michigan won out, because then they would say, wow, they beat Michigan, and Michigan just took down Wisconsin on the road and Ohio State. So yeah, just too many things need to play both inside the conference and on the outside too. So as much as I want to hope and dream, unfortunately, it's tough to believe in it. But definitely, we should look forward to a New Year's Six bowl, especially if a Big Ten team does get into the college football playoff. Penn State will easily be playing on New Year's.
And it's interesting because you say that we want to hope and dream, but as realists, as reporters, it's very, very unlikely. It is possible, though, and as I like to say, the game is played on the field, it's not played on paper.
Mm-hmm.
So despite how unlikely it is that Michigan wins out, despite how unlikely it is that Michigan State loses to either Maryland or Rutgers.
That's more unlikely.
That's more unlikely
because Michigan, Brandon Peters, you and I have talked about him, 4-star quarterback, 96 overall rating by 24/7 Sports. They can do it. Some analysts are starting to look real closely at Michigan, especially, I mean, if you go over to the Big Ten Network, they're constantly talking about Big Ten sports. Right? I mean, crazy, right? No. But, one of the topics is, can Brandon Peters go and lead this, this new Michigan offense? They haven't been truly tested yet. And similarly with this Wisconsin team, I want to say Michigan is their first true test of the season. They bring them into camp, they bring them into Wisconsin. And I think that is monumental for them. If they had to travel to Michigan, I might be picking Michigan in this one, but that's what I mean. So I'm saying don't count out the Wolverines. They're 8-2 for a reason. Their worst losses against Penn State, and they're kind of in a similar situation that they were, to Penn State a couple years ago, last year, excuse me. Penn State, that was really one of their bad blemishes, and it's why they're number 24, even though they're 8-2. So. They've lost to ranked teams unless Michigan State wasn't ranked at the time. So don't count out Michigan. It's going to be closer than people think. And Brandon Peters, I know they played Maryland. I know they played Rutgers. They haven't really had any resistance there for the former 4-star. But it's going to be very interesting. I think the defense comes to play for the Wolverines, but Wisconsin still comes out on top. So that's already one shattered dream there.
Yeah, and no matter the fact that he's a freshman doesn't really matter. After these first 2 games, you have so much confidence that you're a 4-star quarterback. You're finally getting that chance. Who knows? He might be the kind of person who goes out there and he just wants to show off. He could be the kind of guy who really comes into this game, leads the offense, and somehow finds a way to win. And then he's now the starter for the rest of the season. I think
he's going to be the starter from here on out. I think Speed's out. And both him and O'Korn graduate. So and it's not his job to lose. He's had it snagged down 3 wins in a row since he's taken over as the signal caller for Michigan. And I'm excited for him, not from a Penn State perspective, but just from a general college football and eventually professional, because I think this guy has a lot of pro intangibles that are not going to be overlooked.
All right, so let's move on to talking about the game tomorrow. Not tomorrow. Actually, this will come out on Friday.
Yeah,
so tomorrow.
Saturday. We'll talk about Saturday's game.
Yeah.
So this is Nebraska. Nebraska coming in at 4-6 overall. If they win out, they get a bowl berth. And even if they win one, they might get in. They do have another tough test after traveling to Penn State, traveling to Kinnick. We know about Kinnick Magic. Penn State almost saw it, and Ohio State definitely saw it. So Nebraska, Penn State, and then Iowa. They do technically control their own destiny. I know I saw the Big Ten Network panel discussing, what 5 and 7 teams could make a bowl season this year. And Nebraska, they've really only lost to tough opponents. They've lost to Wisconsin. They've lost to Ohio State. There's really no one I look at their schedule and I say, Nebraska, that's a terrible loss. They've lost to Oregon, to name some others.
They lost to
who else have they lost to?
Minnesota, Northwestern. I'd say both of those are sort of mediocre. And then they've also lost to the Northern Illinois Huskies.
Well, Northwestern's actually ranked. Northern Illinois is a bad loss.
Actually, they're 8-3, but they are in the MAC.
So that might, depending on how you splice it, that could be a bad loss. I mean, when bowl season comes around, we see how many MAC and how so many of those smaller school non-Power 5 teams just come and upset. Everything's different. But breaking down Nebraska, so this team can score the ball a little bit, but their biggest weakness is definitely their defense, averaging allowed over 30 points per game, close to 32. They average 25, so it's kind of similar to Rutgers again. This isn't the Nebraska team that you remember with Bo Pelini and Ndamukong Suh, and even still, you can go past that, look past even just like, the one great year of Suh and look at Taylor Martinez. That guy was a headache when Nebraska joined the Big Ten. So that's what I think of when I think of Nebraska. But right now they're just kind of, they're really, they're just not a threat. I definitely see them scoring some points on Saturday, but nothing crazy. They can definitely move the ball. They have Tanner Lee at quarterback, Divine Ozigbo at running back. I'm watching some of his highlights. He's tough. He's tough to take down. So especially against a defense that has struggled a little bit as of late, especially in the passing game, I feel like a lot of play action can open up some holes in that defense on Saturday. So I'm not saying I'm not arguing that Penn State's, in for a total shocker, but don't be surprised if, Nebraska puts up 17 points on Saturday.
I wanted to mention there is a chance that Tanner Lee won't be the starting quarterback in this game. I believe he was injured in the last game against Minnesota, and they brought in freshman quarterback Patrick O'Brien.
He did have some stats, yeah.
He had 192 yards and 1 interception, but there is a chance that he is going to be the starting quarterback against a Penn State team at Penn State in what is looking to be awful weather this weekend. So the fact that ESPN is giving Penn State a 97% chance to win, and the fact that Nebraska fans have basically, every fan that walks into that stadium has already basically decided who's going to win this game. Penn State is leading in the spread by 26.5 points. So all of these factors, I don't think that Nebraska, I agree with you that Nebraska is not going to win this game. I don't see them putting up that many points either. Just the fact that
it doesn't. If you're telling me the weather is going to be as bad as it is, it doesn't. Look what it happened to Penn State when they had that 3-hour weather delay, and then still rain and just soggy conditions throughout the Michigan State game, and it's going to be cold. It's going to be cold. It is so hard to throw the football in that kind of weather. The ball just doesn't carry the same as it does. I think you're gonna see some sloppy play from both teams, but obviously Penn State's more talented and able to make up from it, whereas Nebraska is going to be reeling, especially if they have to play their backup quarterback in O'Brien. So I'm hoping that, but if you're telling me that the weather's this bad, then I'm probably going to I would take Nebraska with the spread, saying that they're going to come within 26.5, and I would take the under. They're projecting 55 points total. So this could be a very, it could be like a 31-10 type game from what you're implying here.
Yeah, it says on AccuWeather that Saturday is supposed to be 48 and rainy.
Sunday, so not as cold.
Not as cold as I was expecting, but Sunday there's a chance of snow or cold showers. High of 41, low of 29. So obviously the weather is not as predictable as places like AccuWeather and whatever weather app that you use say. It's always different the day of. Things change. We might see it be as cold as it's supposed to be Sunday on Saturday. Either way, it's going to be wet conditions. It's going to be not quite as bad, I don't expect, as Michigan State. But I think without the weather delay, Penn State will still win this. Whether they score as many is the question, as you pointed out.
Yeah. So, what do you like from Nebraska as far as this team? 32 points per game. That's ugly, especially against some just outside. Wisconsin's not an offensive team, but Ohio State definitely did a number to them, and that might be why their average is so high. But they still do allow over 20 points to some other opponents. They squeaked out a win against Purdue, 25-24. You like to see the comeback, but if Nebraska can hurt Penn State, how can they do it? Passing attack comes first to mind, but if O'Brien's in, they might have to go somewhere else. Does Ozigbo play? Does he play a factor in this game of just giving Penn State a headache? Maybe not. Just totally catching them off guard.
I think with it being senior day, with all of the fans that are going to be there to see Saquon Barkley in his last home game, we'll touch on that later. I think the passing game really is going to be what they're going to lean on. Whether O'Brien has the ability to lead this offense is the question, but they average more than twice the amount of passing yards as they do running yards, plus the fact that the Penn State pass defense has had some trouble, whether it's giving up costly penalties or not being able to protect the short passing game as well as it had in the earlier in the season. The rushing game, I see a lot of the young Penn State players that have to play due to injuries They start to get tired towards the end of the game, but I expect after, especially after the way that the Rutgers game started with Penn State not being able to get on the board immediately, that's going to be something that they've worked on all week. And
Definitely.
coming back, I'm sure that that's what they're going to be focusing on. So I don't see Penn State having too much of a headache in this game, but I do see the passing game being the more threatening area. Azigbo has 468 yards for 2 touchdowns on 119 carries. Not quite as much as you would expect from someone who's going to really threaten this Penn State rush defense.
So you brought it up, senior day. There's a lot of seniors on this team and potential juniors that could graduate or just leave. In general, I don't know any of their academic statuses, but I mean, you named Saquon Barkley. Like even though he is a junior, it's still possibly his senior day technically. We've seen players come back and things not go to fruition for staying that extra year in school, and especially from a running back's case, it is interesting because running backs are one of the quickest positions out of the NFL, so Saquon Barkley is definitely taking that into an account, and just what teams are going to be up there and everything, and I mean ultimately there's probably a 98% chance that he goes. Definitely, he could stay, losing out on the Heisman, not being able to have a chance. I mean, it's still very tiny, but most likely not head to the national championship. With that being said, so let's just name some of the people that were not going to be with us in the 2018 season. Yes, this is very early in the present, but it's something to address because there are a lot of people that are missing that have made huge impacts for this team in 2016 and 2017. So we have Saquon Barkley, we have Mike Gesicki, we have Brendan Mann, we have Deshaun Hamilton, we have both Cawthorns, we have Grant Haley, we have Christian Campbell, we have Marcus Allen, and we have Jason Kabinda, and just some of the other guys in between, that aren't necessarily stars in offense and defense, but, we have Vasey, the long snapper, could be departing, and Tyler Davis, another guy, your senior kicker. He hasn't performed as well as we've liked him to, but in the end, he still is your senior kicker and a captain. Just in general, what are your thoughts from this? Penn State's recruited a lot of young, promising talent, but to just assume that they're going to hit the ground running, right away in 2018 isn't preposterous, but it's definitely hard to reason with. That's just my opinion. I think Miles Sanders is definitely capable, and that's not even to take away from Andre Robinson. I think that Miles Sanders is definitely better, and he's proved it not only with touches this year, much improved play. That was the first article I wrote for Armchair. How well can Miles Sanders perform? And even though he hasn't gotten the touches, he's performed much better. But aside from that, they have a lot of positions they're going to need to fill. Both cornerback positions are open. The free safety position's open. Nick Scott returns, but he's probably going to be playing strong safety. Troy Apke's another one that's going to be leaving. So
Jason Kabinda in the line.
The whole second. Well, I expect Manny Bowen to take over very nicely there in the middle. I expect him to be the signal caller. Cam Robinson got a lot of good playing time. But Tommy, I definitely want to know your thoughts about this. Most of this team, most of the starting unit is going to be gone in 2018. What does that mean for Penn State? Because when I looked at that schedule, that is a hard schedule, man. They play Michigan, they play Michigan State, they play Wisconsin, they play Ohio State, and Maryland's definitely going to be much improved next year. Everyone might say and take this Maryland team and say, well, they finished below 500. They might see a couple wins. I can easily see a 9-3 Maryland team next year. Believe it or not, I am going to say that on a podcast. I was thinking that Maryland would be 8-4 this year, but then their starting and backup quarterback went down. I love Casem Hill. I think he's the future of that program. And when he stepped in for Big Rome, I thought that that I'm like they're going to take off. This offense is going to be not unstoppable, but definitely a big improvement, and that next year Maryland is going to break out and be an 8-4 team and could potentially, I know it's in Happy Valley, but potentially upset them depending on how overlooked Maryland is. So it's a tougher schedule. Just what are your thoughts in general? If it starts with, you lose the face of your program, Saquon Barkley, or is it because the defense is going to have an entire makeover, almost 9 starters?
I think the really interesting part, I do agree it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve at the beginning of the year, but you look at the depth chart right now, there are a lot of really promising freshmen who are on the team right now, not even mentioning the recruits that are going to be coming in. A lot of them, Ricky Slade to
So you
to
think
point
he'll
one
play
out.
right away?
There's
I'd want to use his red shirt though.
there's
I
a
would
chance
really
I
want
would
to.
want to use his red shirt as well, but that's where the other wide receivers come in.
I mean, look what happened to Miles Sanders. You wanted to use his red shirt, or most people did in general, and he had to make an impact right away because there wasn't a lot of depth, promising depth behind Saquon Barkley.
But so on wide receiver, you have Juwan Johnson who's staying again. Irvin Charles, who's done really
I'm very
well.
excited for that.
He's
I'm
done
so excited
very
for that.
well on the special teams. Is going to be
He's going to be very good. Those two on the edges. But who's going to be in the slot? Tell me who can replace Hamilton. Is it Brandon Polk, or should we look towards KJ Hamler? You know, you and I talked about his personality and just how much fun and excitement he brings with what type of person he is on the bench for them as a red shirt. You know, can he provide in the slot? I mean, the dude's so quick. Is it him, or do you trust the senior Brandon Polk, or even DeAndre Tompkins? DeAndre Tompkins is going to return.
DeAndre Tompkins, who's a redshirt junior at the moment, will likely return. He will definitely stay as the punt returner, in my opinion. He's done very well. 2 touchdowns. I think 2, 3 if one of them wasn't called back.
Michigan State,
yeah.
I think. Yeah.
KJ Hamler, I do agree, he's a very fast, very talented wide receiver. Very small, so at 5'9", so he's definitely going to be one of those players in the slot. Brandon Polk is definitely one of those options.
I think he's definitely the leading candidate. I'm just asking if you think Hamler could push him for snap counts.
I think it's going to be a quick battle. I don't know if I can say right now whether Hamler will be able to take that starting spot right away, maybe later in the year, but Polk has definitely shown his ability this year as well. Another couple names that I want to point out, Mac Hippenhammer, he came in this year. I think he was going to play on the baseball team as well.
Both football and baseball, yeah, I heard that too.
We'll see what his athletic ability is like this baseball season if he does join that team. He's also going to be a redshirt freshman. That'll be really interesting to see because he was very hyped up when he came.
That's some good depth to have, and you know that they're bringing in Justin Shorter most likely. Like this receiving core is going to be very deep, but Offense, I'm not totally concerned about because I love Miles Sanders. This offensive line, believe it or not, is going to be a veteran-heavy team, a veteran-heavy unit next year. Where I'm most concerned at defense. What positional group, line, middle linebackers, or secondary are you most concerned about moving forward?
That's a hard question to answer because on the offensive line, we've already seen a lot of freshmen play. Yetur Gross-Matos is fantastic. He's going to be absolutely phenomenal in the next couple years. 6'5", 270 pounds. There's not much you can do to stop him. He's already a starter. At linebacker, you're seeing players like Cam Brown get a lot of stuff a lot of time, as you mentioned. Koa Farmer's going to be gone likely.
Yeah, I didn't even name Koa Farmer.
There's a chance he comes back as a redshirt senior, but Jarvis Miller's also in there as a possible guy to show up. In the secondary, you have Tariq Castro-Fields, who's been playing a lot. Lamont Wade's been playing a lot. Both of them can take over.
I think they can start, yeah. But will they be impacting right away? I'm not sure. I'm hoping they can get out of those. I'm thinking they have a little bit of growing pains, and Wade's shown it. He's not afraid to go up and tackle, but in coverage, he's definitely gotten beat. He's definitely got turned around in some routes. And
at 5'9", if you put a tall wide receiver on him.
Well, yeah, but they're not even using size advantages against him. He's matching up against players that I don't sit there and say like, well, he has no chance against this 6'6" wide receiver. And not that the Big Ten has a lot to sport them to begin with, but I've seen Wade come in on some plays. Against Michigan, there was a big post pattern downfield, and Wayne just kind of blew his coverage there. Definitely comes in when you're an 18-year-old playing with 21, 22, and even 23-year-olds. So. I'm a firm believer that Lamont Wade and Tariq Castro-Fields are the future secondary duo. It's the same thing with Irvin Charles and Juwan Johnson on the offensive end. I think those two duos are going to be fantastic. I'm very excited for both of them, but I'm not also afraid to say that they will have growing pains in the beginning. And I'm hoping they can grow out of them by the time they get Ohio State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Maryland, etc. It's a frightening schedule. I would take a peek at it.
I also want to mention that we've forgotten about John Reed, who was out this year with an ACL injury. Yeah. He's a junior this year. He'll be a senior next year. He'll be back. He'll be able to lead that team. He's still leading that team.
Hopefully. It was a very serious ACL injury because he's been out since April in the spring game, and usually you don't see that. That's like Teddy Bridgewater serious, that doesn't Not often does that happen. You see people, obviously it takes time to recover from ACL surgery, but we haven't heard word of John Reed, and I'm glad you mentioned him because he become. I mean, they voted him last year. They voted him the third best player on this football team. I think that is insane. That talks about his crazy potential that he just hasn't proved yet.
And he's been on the sideline every game so far this year, so he's still with the team, obviously, and he's looking to be one of the top cornerbacks, if not the top cornerback on the team next year. Zach McPherson is also a freshman cornerback that has shown a lot of potential in practice. He's going to be a redshirt next year. Obviously, we have Blake Gillikin for the special teams, and for the kicker, we have Carson Landis and Alex Barbier, who neither of us have seen much of.
I've seen Barbier take practice kicks, but nothing in game, just blue and white stuff and just some practice.
Yeah, not much we can say there. I think the best transition for the offense is going to be on the offensive line.
Oh, let's cross our fingers.
We talked about this before the season. On the depth chart, Andrew Nelson's graduating, but we have Will Fries at left tackle. We have Alex Gellerstedt,
Bates. Brian Bates.
We have Steven Gonzalez, Mike Miranda, who's going to be really good. CJ Thorpe is also on the depth chart. And then we see Mike Miranda twice, also in center. Connor McGovern, though, he's only a sophomore this year.
Yeah, so what you're saying, we could have, it's probably going to be Bates, Steven Gonzalez, Connor McGovern. I think Miranda and Thorpe are going to battle for that right guard spot.
Michael Mennett's also in that.
And then, Michael Mennett's there too. And then so I'll tell you guarantees right now. Steven Gonzalez at left guard, Connor McGovern at center, Will Fries at right tackle, Bates at left tackle, and right guard. That's going to be up for grabs, especially with Mann leaving. But this is Will Fries. He solidified that spot. He had so much praise in the summer as the redshirt when he was a redshirt freshman. He still is, but when he was transitioning into being eligible to play in college football, and he's been phenomenal. He's going to move back to that right tackle spot where he will help anchor for the front side of McSorley.
Also, I want to mention one last thing before we move on. Tommy Stevens, there is a chance that he is graduating at the end of the year, despite the fact that he is currently a redshirt sophomore. I have no proof of this, but I have seen. I have a friend who's in one of his classes, and he has a website project, and in his project he says that he'll be graduating at the end of the year. So if that does happen and Tommy Stevens is not on the Penn State roster next season, we have Sean Clifford, who has surprised greatly.
I'm very excited for Sean Clifford. Yeah, very excited.
He's made it into that third spot. As a freshman, he's going to be a redshirt freshman next season. So coming into next season, if Sean Clifford happens to win that position, we could see. Trace McSorley will be back next season, so he'll likely keep the position. But Sean Clifford's going to be back there as well. He has a great arm. He has fantastic potential.
He's built for this offense, and that's what Franklin said. And I want to chime in because if Tommy Stevens does transfer, everyone's probably holding their breath like, what are we going to do after McSorley leaves? Or, what if he gets injured? I think that it would be best for both parties for Tommy Stevens to transfer, because if he becomes a senior and then a graduate senior at another program, that would be, very helpful for him as a quarterback and developing into an NFL quarterback. It might be best for him to transfer. And as much as I love Tommy Stevens and would love to see him take the reins as a redshirt freshman after McSorley, you can't just flip McSorley out of the starting lineup just because of a couple mistakes or an errant throw. They're going to be 10-2 for back-to-back seasons. I'm not expecting them to lose to Nebraska or Maryland. That will change my mind. McSorley still has a clean, completion percentage. He has some high throws, a couple interceptions, but nothing where I sit there and say, boneheaded, like, why is he still out there? He's tough as nails, and you can't just give away the position to, basically an unproven player. He's looked great in the spring game, but if we were rewarding spots to people who performed in the spring game, then Mark Allen would start over Saquon Barkley, because Mark Allen's the king of spring games for Penn State football. So I think it might be best for Stevens, if he wants to, benefit his career and not just benefit Penn State, move to another program, and then Sean Clifford takes over as a redshirt sophomore, which would be good for Penn State. But that's all I have to say on the matter. That's definitely a ways away. I can't wait to discuss that further and write articles about it for Armchair. But just as a synopsis, I think you and I covered it well.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of positivity on the horizon coming in, especially with all of the talk right now about whether Saquon Barkley's leaving or not, and the fear surrounding that, whether this was the year for Penn State football. Certainly not, in my opinion. This was a very good year for Penn State football. It was very
4 points separated them. Four ugly points. Yeah.
All of that. This could have been the year for sure. Years in the future also have that potential. This was not a one and done year for Penn State, especially with Coach Franklin getting these fantastic
I think 2018 will be a bit of a struggle, not as far as, they're 6-6. No, they'll definitely, but 8-4, 9-3, expect that range. Don't expect any pushes for 11-1, 12-0. And then 2019, 2020, that's it. This 2018 recruiting class, when they're starting to push redshirt sophomore and true junior in 2020 and 2021, everyone's going to love Penn State football, but I think that's where we should start. We're rambling about the future too much. Let's talk about the now Saturday's game against Nebraska. Tommy, what's the score and why? We know who you're picking to win.
I'm going to say with the weather, it's probably going to be somewhere around 45-6. I can't see them scoring a touchdown against Penn State. They haven't done well in the scoring department at all. Plus, being at Beaver Stadium, Rutgers, even with all of the advantages they had at the beginning of the game, only put up 2 field goals. So I'm saying 45-6.
Okay. I think it's going to be 34-14. I don't think that Penn State covers the spread. I think Nebraska actually does. I think that with the weather's a big impact, and right now Penn State hasn't shown to me that they can play in these types of, weather games, or that it holds them back a little bit. It's just hard for me. They've only put up 40 points, against a good team once, and that was against Michigan. So, I mean, they beat down Akron, they beat down Georgia State. Okay, that's fine. That's, understandable. But, when it's come to, this is going to get dark, and it's going to get colder as, time wears down. And Nebraska, I'm curious to see how the possible QB change might, throw off their team chemistry, or might even throw off Penn State. But it's going to be, I think Penn State cracks the 30s, and Nebraska scores. I think they can score. It might be like around that 14 range. So my prediction will be 34-14.
Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. I think the ESPN guess of 97% chance for Penn State may even be a little bit under.
Yeah,
I put it at 98, 99%.
Yeah,
I think 3%
it's gonna hold true. All right, thank you everyone for joining us on the Sermon on Mount Nittany podcast, episode 12. We can't wait to come back with more editions of this, because Penn State's going to make a bowl game regardless of how their season finishes. Might even make the college football playoffs if Penn State fans and players and coaches are lucky, and the alumni, don't forget about them. But please check out all the other content on armchairallamericans.com. Be sure to check out the other podcasts, leave feedback, comments on all the stories, and if you are interested in writing or contributing to Armchair, please feel free to apply. We need great young minds and great older minds, all the wisdom we can get for the sport, the sports commentary that, definitely should be heard. So thanks for joining us. Zach Sako and Tommy Butler. We'll see you again with the next episode.